Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. I do have one quick favor before we get to the video that you came here for, and that is very simply this. You see that little red subscribe button below this video? Go ahead, smash that subscribe button. It really does help me. It really does help this channel grow and my audience grow. So go ahead and hit that red subscribe button. And now, here is the video that you came here for. But FanDuel put out Week 1 college football point spreads, and what I want to do is go through some of these teams, talk a little bit about these point spreads, and talk about a loaded Week 1 and Week 2 of college football. Here is what you need to know just Week 1 and Week 2 of college football. Forget, Ohio State, Michigan, Alabama, LSU. Just Week 1. We have LSU at UCLA, which is maybe more interesting for me than anybody because UCLA plays right down the road from me. By the way, if we have any LSU fans, let me know if you're coming out. We'll have to have an Aaron Torres pod get together, something like that here in Pasadena. Email me, Aaron Torres podcast questions at gmail.com if you're an LSU fan coming out. But LSU, UCLA Week 1, Alabama, Miami Week 1, the mega game, which is Georgia, Clemson. Both of those teams will start in the top 5. They are opening Week 1. Beyond that, you have Florida State and Notre Dame. You have Louisville and Ole Miss on Labor Day night. And then in Week 2, oh, by the way, you got Texas, Arkansas. You got Michigan, Washington. You got Ohio State, Oregon. Talk about a mega opening 2 weeks of college football. So there's so many good games. And what I want to do is break down some of these Week 1 point spreads. And like I said, if you're a gambler, it's not too early. And oh, by the way, if you're not a gambler, it's still kind of great to just kind of refresh that college football portion of your brain. Like, oh yeah, that thing happened and that will impact these games. And so what I want to do is talk about some of these Week 1 point spreads, the teams that I like, if I would bet them, if I would stay away, who I like. And I'll tell you this, while I can't legally gamble in California, I am going to Vegas this weekend, and you better believe your boy Torres is going to be looking out for some of these Week 1 point spreads. So let's talk Week 1 point spreads. These are via FanDuel.com. I have no partnership with FanDuel. I just saw these pop up. And so FanDuel put out Week 1 point spreads. And let's start with the big one. Georgia, Clemson. This game will be in Charlotte. It will be the opening weekend in college football. It will be the opening ACC, not the ACC, the ABC marquee game. As I said, I host on Fox Sports Radio. I know I'll be talking about this one a lot that week. But what you need to know is essentially this, is two things. One, these two teams are going to start in the top 5. And really the story of this game is Georgia. Because this is not only the story of this game, it might be the story of this season, which is if Georgia can't do it this year, I don't know if it will ever happen. And let me do a little bit of a backstory. And again, this is kind of to refresh that college football portion of your brain. But Georgia, look, we know the story of the last 5, 6, 7 years. Kirby Smart, great defense, great run game. They never have the quarterback. And when they get on the big stage against the elite quarterback, it never goes well. Didn't go well against Tua, didn't go well against Joe Burrow, didn't go well against Kyle Trask last year, didn't go well against Mac Jones last year. But then a funny thing happened. Georgia lost a couple games. They were completely out of the national championship picture. And then Kirby Smart puts in JT Daniels, the transfer from USC. And why he put him in late, there were some injury things, all this stuff. But what you need to know is that Kirby Smart puts in JT Daniels, and the offense takes off. JT Daniels starts the last 3 games of the regular season. Georgia puts up 31, 45, and 49 points in their last 3 games with JT Daniels under center. They win the Peach Bowl against Cincinnati, and then boom, just like that, it has been the summer of Georgia, where I don't know if Georgia has ever gotten more hype coming into a season in my lifetime than they are right now. Because they've always had the defense, they've always had the run game. Now they may actually have the quarterback. JT Daniels, as I mentioned, a USC transfer. He was a guy that was basically the number 1 recruit in his high school class. He reclassified, moved up a year, started at USC as a true freshman. He gets hurt, replaced by Keaton Slovis. But I bring it up to say, he is the closest thing that Georgia has had to a marquee quarterback in basically forever. Maybe Matt Stafford, maybe Aaron Murray. It's been a long time, though, and so that is why Georgia, there's so much hype going into this game. Of course, they are playing Clemson. Not sure if you've heard, they've been pretty good over the last couple years. Clemson enters this game as a 3-point favorite, and I think it'll be fascinating to see where the money comes in as we get closer to the start of the season. because I do think Georgia matches up well with Clemson. Clemson is breaking in a new starter at quarterback. Remember, Trevor Lawrence out. DJ Uiagalelei is in. And while I did like DJ Uiagalelei when he started in place of Trevor Lawrence, I did think he was a little rough around the edges. Kind of a real, I don't know what the right football terminology is, but kind of a hard thrower. He didn't have a ton of touch on his passes. And so I will say that in general, I'm not sold that like Clemson is this unbeatable juggernaut that they have been the last couple years. Now, they're going to play in the ACC. They're going to steamroll everybody in the ACC. But in terms of this game, I actually think Georgia matches up really well with them. It's worth noting with Clemson, yes, they do start the new quarterback, but their best wide receiver from 2 seasons ago, Justin Ross, may be back. Justin Ross, really talented wide receiver, had a major medical issue last year, but many believe that he'll be cleared this year. And also that Clemson basically returns their entire defense from last year, the team that made the Sugar Bowl against Ohio State. If you remember that super hard hit that Justin Fields took against Ohio State, that super hard hit was from a kid by the name of James Stalski. He was kind of the heart and soul of that defense. He is back. And so in terms of this game, I'll just be honest. I know it's not sexy to say that I'm not taking a side. I would probably lean Georgia, but I don't love it. But what I would say is pay attention for an over-under, because I think this is just a bloodbath, back and forth war, and I would take the under when that comes out. If I had to take a side right now, I would take Georgia +3. Second marquee game of the opening weekend of the college football season, Alabama playing Miami. They're playing in Atlanta. It is the typical neutral site opening weekend game that Alabama always plays. And if you follow college football, this is like, the sign that the leaves are changing, the clocks are changing, whatever you know about fall that makes you feel like, okay, fall is here. Alabama steamrolling a really good opponent on the opening weekend is pretty much the standard opening weekend fare. And that is why this game is really interesting. Alabama's playing Miami. Alabama is actually a 17.5-point favorite, and that's reflective of the fact that if you give Nick Saban more than 1 week to prepare, he's basically unbeatable. And if you give him a whole offseason to prepare, oh my goodness, it never ends well for the opponent. Through the years, Alabama has beaten Michigan on the opening weekend, Wisconsin, USC, Florida State, on and on and on and on and on. And just for fun, I went back and looked at Alabama's 4 most recent openers, excluding this past season where it was an SEC-only schedule. Alabama opened at Missouri and they won. But here are Alabama's last 4 opening games to start the season in college football when they play on a neutral field against a non-conference team. 2019, they beat Duke 42-3. 2018, they beat Louisville 51-14. 2017, they beat Florida State 24-3. And if that sounds like it was really close, well, guess what? Florida State was the number 3 team in the country coming into the season, and Alabama still beat them by 3 touchdowns. And the year before, Alabama beats USC 52-6. If you remember, that was when Lane Kiffin was the offensive coordinator, and he got a thrill out of blowing out USC. So the last 4 out-of-conference regular season openers for Alabama, 42-3, 51-14, 24-3, and 52-6. I bring this up to say I would probably lean Alabama here. Now, what you need to know about Miami, if you remember, De'Aaron King was the quarterback last year, transferred in from Houston. He gets hurt in the bowl game, but he is back. They brought in some kind of interesting transfers in the portal. Charleston Rambo, who was a really good wide receiver 2 years ago at Oklahoma, he is in when he played with Jalen Hurts. So Miami is going to be good. Miami might be the second best team in the ACC. I don't know how I feel about them playing Bama. Don't know if I love the Bama 17.5. I would probably do one of 2 things. I would either take a Bama first half. I do think it'll be something like 21-3 at halftime, 28-3. I mean, Alabama is going to kick butt. It's just a matter of, is it going to be over the course of the full game, and are they going to cover the 17.5? The other thing that I would seriously consider, waiting till we can get an over-under, I would take an over. I don't think Alabama's offense misses a beat this year as Bill O'Brien takes over for Steve Sarkisian as the head coach. And if you've forgotten, yes, Bill O'Brien, the former head coach of the Houston Texans, is now the head coach at Alabama. But Alabama opens up as a 17.5-point favorite. How about this one? LSU at UCLA to open the 2020 college football season. And I'll be honest, I try to keep my finger on the pulse of everything. I was like stunned when I saw this for a couple reasons. One, because UCLA is right down the road from where I live. UCLA, the school is, well, the Rose Bowl is right down the road from where I live. UCLA is about 35 minutes. But I bring it up to say, LSU fans, I don't know how many of you listen to this show, but hit your boy up. We're going to have an Aaron Torres pod party here in Pasadena before that LSU game. And more than anything, I'm just excited to see how LSU fans handle Pasadena. LSU fans are the notorious, don't take this the wrong way, LSU fans, they're the notorious biggest drinkers in college football. They drink entire bars out of beer. They drink entire cities out of beer. And so I am fascinated to see them in person. If you're an LSU fan, hit me up, Aaron Torres Podcast Questions at gmail.com. We'll get together. We'll hang out. But I bring it up to say that intrigued me. And the other thing that intrigued me, LSU was only a 3-point favorite to open in FanDuel. And so to me, that was the first one. I was like, take LSU, take LSU. And I will say the line has already moved to 3.5. But that is also one that I would consider, it's just interesting, right? Because you think LSU, you think Coach O, you think they're all this skill and athleticism. If you remember back to last year, they were not very good. If you remember back to last year, LSU, they started the season reigning national champs. Everyone's hyped up. Mike Leach goes into LSU, goes into Tiger Stadium, and they steamroll LSU. We find out like 2 weeks later, Mississippi State isn't good at all. They lose to Arkansas, Kentucky, all these other teams. But then after that, LSU season never really got better. They finished 5-5, but they were 3-5 at one point before winning their final 2 games, including one as a 20-plus point underdog against Florida. So this was not a vintage LSU team last year. Now, what's interesting is they did make a bunch of changes in the offseason. Bo Pelini was the offensive coordinator. He is out. The defensive coordinator, he is out. They've changed coordinators again, and we'll see if Coach O can get things re-rolling here. But it's also worth noting UCLA wasn't as bad as you remember. Like UCLA still, Chip Kelly's their coach. Like they should be better than they were. But they finished the season last year 3-4 overall. Not great, I get it. But the offense kind of figured things out late. 5 of their 7 games that they played, they scored 34-plus points. They scored 40-plus points 3 times of their 7 games. And they almost beat USC, which was basically undefeated going into the last week of the season, which is crazy because if you remember, the Pac-12 only played 5, 6, 7 games with all of its teams. But UCLA may be starting to figure it out with Chip Kelly, but I'll also tell you that line is going to move in a hurry. If you can bet, and if you do like to bet, I would jump on LSU as soon as I could because that number is going to go up, and I would take LSU here. Moving to the rest of the weekend. So it's really interesting. Remember, that opening weekend of college football, don't forget, it is on Labor Day weekend, so we get games Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. And the Sunday night game is actually kind of an interesting one. It is Notre Dame at Florida State. Notre Dame opens as a 9-point favorite in that game. And what's really interesting to me about this is a few things. One, I think it speaks to for like how much we crap on Notre Dame. It kind of speaks to how far they've come as a program where they make the playoff last year. Remember, they lost to Alabama in the playoff. But then they lose their starting quarterback, Ian Book. They lose a bunch of offensive linemen. They lose a bunch of key defensive players. And they're still almost a double-digit favorite going to Florida State. Now, part of that is just because Florida State wasn't very good last year. If you'll remember, they went, what would they go? I think they went 3-6 overall, if memory serves me correct. They had that weird situation. Remember the deal with Florida State and Clemson, where Clemson shows up to play Florida State, and Florida State's just like, yeah, we're not playing. You have one COVID test. Like, by the way, that's what I'm talking about when I'm saying, like, getting your college football brain going again. So much stuff happened last year, especially in the COVID year. But Florida State, really weird year, 3-6 first year under Mike Norvell. But this game will be at Doak Campbell. This is not a neutral site game. This is a true road game for Notre Dame. I would probably take Florida State plus the points, but I wouldn't feel great about it. Maybe take Florida State in the first half. Maybe Notre Dame pulls away late. But that is one that I'll ultimately probably just stay away from, as Notre Dame is going to be breaking in a new quarterback. It looks as though the kid that was a transfer from Wisconsin, Jack Cohn, is going to be the starter there. Final week 1 college football game worth noting. It comes Labor Day night. Remember, we always get that great Monday night game. And this one, I don't know if we get 2 great teams, but it should be entertaining. It is Louisville versus Ole Miss and our boy Lane Kiffin. And if you remember, first of all, 7-point spread, I would run to the window and bet Ole Miss right now, because Ole Miss, like, the thing about Lane Kiffin, He just goes and goes and goes and goes and goes. He doesn't stop scoring ever. This is now year 2 in his offense. Matt Corral is back at quarterback. He is going to be ready to go. And so on top of that, you have an Ole Miss team that I believe is ascending under Lane Kiffin. I actually like what he did last year. I know Lane Kiffin's kind of like a Twitter joke punching bag guy. I thought he was really good. But Louisville, if you remember, also a little bit of a mess last season. If you can remember back to last season, never forget, Louisville had that weird thing where Scott Satterfield, the season finishes, they go 4-7. It is a colossal disappointment. Remember, they were really good in Scott Satterfield's first year. They go 4-7 last year, and then he goes out after the season and interviews for the South Carolina job. Then he removes his name from the South Carolina job and does this like social media Twitter post of like, guys, I'm back. And the fans are like, what are you doing? You've been here 2 years, your team stunk, and you want us to pat you on the back? Because you didn't take a crappy job? What are you doing here, Scott Satterfield? So I like Ole Miss in that game. That is another one that I would probably bet if I was in Vegas, which I will be later this week, so I might throw a little bit on that. But again, the week 1 opening lines, Clemson, Georgia. Clemson is a 3-point favorite. I'd probably lean Georgia plus the points, but I would wait to play the under in that game. Alabama, Miami. Alabama is a 17.5-point favorite. Would probably take Alabama first half or the over. Don't know if I'd bet the game total. LSU at UCLA. LSU a 3-point favorite. I would take LSU. The Sunday night game, is Notre Dame at Florida State. Notre Dame a 9-point favorite. I would probably stay away there. Remember, Florida State will have 100% capacity for that game. And then finally in Atlanta, Labor Day night, Ole Miss 7-point favorite over Louisville, and I would take Ole Miss.